Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world, and welcome to the FIP YouTube channel, FIP World. I'm James Hughes, President and CEO of FIP, one of the world's leading media trade associations. Now in January, Jim Elliott and John French co-hosted a well-attended FIP Insider webinar titled What Smart Companies Are Doing to Prepare for the Rebound. You can find the video of that session elsewhere on this channel. Now, we're delighted to be working with them once again in presenting this video series consisting of 3 sessions, all about managing the sales force during the rebound. Jim and John will be asking their guests how they will be helping salespeople get back in front of customers, how they plan to bring sales teams back into the office, what's happening with hiring and onboarding, and the effect of various technologies, including sales empowerment software and video conferencing. Now, since 1984, Jim has run the outsourced advertising sales company he founded, James G. Elliott Co. Inc., and having led 3 major publishing companies, John French is currently consulting at John French LLC. I'm now going to hand over to your hosts for this session, so take it away, Jim and John.
We are pleased to introduce Kate Spellman, CMO of Questex. Kate is an accomplished business leader who brings a proven and consistent track record for launching and driving rapid growth in information service businesses. Before joining Questex in 2018, Kate served as president of Informa Engage, the marketing services business of Informa, a global information services company. Previously, Kate was Chief Marketing Officer at Penton. Earlier, Kate was at UBM and launched the UBM Studio, which was the marketing services arm of UBM, where she launched and drove rapid growth in the company's digital businesses. Welcome, Kate. According to your recent interview with Digiday, Questex has not fully opened your 3 U.S. offices, but you hope to do so by June. Does that mean that the salespeople will be required to come in on a daily basis, or will you have some kind of a hybrid model?
Jim, thank you for the question, and I want to thank you and FIPS for having me. I much appreciate it. So in June, we'll be opening up the offices. We're going to be piloting opening up the offices. We're asking for voluntary attendance, and it's interesting. We just did an employee survey. And I would say that out of the roles, the salespeople are the most anxious to get back to business. So we expect a higher attendance from them than we do some of the other roles. And we can talk about that in a little bit. We do expect a full return in September. However, we will be going, to your question, to that hybrid role. So what does that mean? That means that the offices will be more about collaboration. I think one of the things that we're missing right now is these have been great Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, but that innovation of getting together and sharing ideas. So we'll be doing a lot more of that. And we'll be setting up the offices more in that look and feel. I think what we're also missing is deeper training, which I know is a question that you and I have talked about. And we'll be able to do more of that training with the salespeople as well. So that's what we're looking at currently.
That's great. Kate, in the last year or so, your company, and like a lot of companies in this industry, had to figure out a new way of doing business because of COVID. And the live events went away, and then there were virtual events, and there's a combination of content-driven events and a lot of different things. But now we're seeing, thankfully, the return of some of those events. And you have one coming up actually pretty quickly up in Phoenix. Yeah. I think it's a 3-day buyer-seller in-person event, which, wow, I'm talking about a live event after over the year. This is good. But then with COVID and the vaccines, are there any regulations that go with that? Do you have restraints or restrictions for your employees, the guests, the exhibitors, or anyone tied to the event? How does that work with if it's not legal, just with the preferences for vaccines?
Yeah, John, great question. And it's been a roller coaster of a ride. I mean, it depends on the state, if the state is opening. So, for example, we have 2 shows in May. One is GMITE and the other is CyBEC. So in the meetings and in the fitness space. CyBEC we initially actually had in California, and we moved to Arizona because California isn't open. So it's been a lot of that back and forth. And then at the same time, literally daily discussions on safety. So we've launched a program across Questex called Be Safe. And although we're not requiring vaccinations, we are going to be doing a lot of safety precautions. So for example, our first show, which is GMITE, which is a meetings planning show, everyone will be tested before they go into the building. And it's at the hotel itself, which is the Arizona Grand Resort and Spa. We will be using one building. So it's almost a bubble there where people will be pretty protected. And you mentioned it's hosted buyers, so it's one-on-one. So there'll be 6 feet tables with plexiglass in suites. So there'll be one-on-one rooms. So I think the team, the event performance team, the operations team has done a really good job in working with the venue to add a lot of these safety precautions. And, certainly we will have medical team on staff. We're putting a lot behind that. It's going to be important to get us back to business.
Thank you, Kate. Let me drill down on this a little bit, if you don't mind. This is an issue for me also and my staff. You mentioned in the interview that you will not encourage anyone who is uncomfortable about attending to go. Yeah. Does that include fully vaccinated people? And how long do you expect that policy to stay in place?
Again, that's a great question. And it's really interesting on, people getting back and workforce getting back. We're seeing a couple things. In vertical, for example, meeting planners is the first one we have in fitness, both really impacted by coronavirus, and they are anxious to get back to work. So we have very good attendance at both. However, at GMITE, we actually have a couple people from Questex who will not be attending because they are not comfortable. And I think to answer your question, it's not necessarily the sales roles, by the way, which I think is very interesting. It's also not the event operations people. They're very anxious to get back up and go. I don't think we know how long we will make this a requirement or not a requirement. I mean, you can't not work at Questex forever and decide not to go to events, but I think it's too early for us to project when is that going to happen.
So now to the economics of this. Actually, I'm going to preface this by saying that we have a couple of other guests, and one of our guests is Steve Grossman. And Steve Grossman is a sales consultant, but not in the media space. He works for a lot of very large corporations and helping their sales forces, looking at compensation and lots of things like that. He said to me that really the biggest question isn't coming back into the office. It is making sales calls on customers. So with that said, my next question is, how will travel budgets be affected as sales calls resume? What are your expectations that your folks will start making in-person sales calls?
Yeah, that's, again, fantastic question. And it's interesting. I was on a panel a couple weeks ago with the head of travel, the travel division for EY. And she also has her eye on travel itself at EY. And their opinion is that travel will go down about 30% across the board after the pandemic. Now, I think that we will certainly be keeping our eye more on sales calls and travel, meaning flying and expenses. Some of that was done prior. But I think it's going to be more focused on what's the ROI, what are we getting in return for the travel. Now, where we're a little bit different is before the pandemic, we're 70% event company. And we have a very unique business in that in almost every vertical, we have the hosted buyer, so one-on-one. We have conferences, so, learning and more networking, and we have trade shows. So we have an opportunity with our salespeople to send them to these events and have these touch points throughout the year, which I think is a little bit different. The other thing we've done, and this was kind of during pandemic, so we have not really put this into effect yet, is the event media teams are now combined. So they're selling the same thing to the same person. So it's going to be a little bit of a different model now that will be flying the salespeople to these events and selling into that one company rather than having events sit on one side and media sit on the other. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. And I think on paper it sounds really great, and we'll see how that pans out in real life.
Yes.
That's great. In looking at new employees and bringing people on board, and I imagine you've definitely brought people on board during the COVID, and just more personalized. Our oldest daughter accepted a great position at the company 5 months ago, and she's never met anyone. And what they utilize for those guys is they have an 8:45 call every day, and they just try to get to know each other, and then they get into business. So a lot of tools like that have happened. So going forward, coming out of the Rebound, number one, will it change onboarding? And also the second is just specifically the salespeople, will the amount of training go up because rebounding and maybe still do some virtually? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I love that you shared what your daughter is doing, because I think that's a steal of this idea. And to your point, and I hadn't thought about this, but our CEO, Paul Miller, who you both know, is having a meeting with all of the new people as they start. Now, what's really interesting is for the first time, they're actually seeing each other, because we do have people sitting in different offices and we do have people working from home. So now they're actually seeing each other and getting to know each other, which I don't think really was happening prior at all. And I think what we've also done is we've launched, specifically in sales, which I think we really doubled down on, is a sales council for the senior salespeople to get together and bring ideas. But we're also launching what we call Sales Fuel, because I think that's missing right now is more of that hands-on training, the role playing, we're launching a product, so we're launching products right now and kind of handing it over, and there's a gap. So we're launching again, what we're calling Sales Fuel, which will be very simple, half hour, basically training, 10 minutes. Here's what the product is. 10 minutes. Here's how a real sales person is selling it from the company, and then Q&A. So more of that lunch and learn type. And we're literally launching that next week. When we first started with sales training, and it was more of like really from the center and pushing it out. And it's an hour call, and I'm sure people are asleep halfway through. So I think these rapid type, and reality, here's how your peer is selling it. Here's what the network looks like. So I think that's going to help a lot.
My final question is, how does sales management or the salespeople feel about using Zoom and other video conferencing tools? Have they felt that's been effective? Has the rate of new business been good or less because of that?
Again, great question. I think starting out, we all had our issues with Zoom or Teams. We're all using the same thing, but I think we've all had to get used to it, and that's been a good thing. We've grown 36% in digital. And I think, again, what's interesting is looking at the verticals and who wants to come back live. You've got travel, hospitality, very much looking at coming back live, spa, beauty. We have some other verticals, for example, in the technology or telecom, that's much more comfortable and probably will stay comfortable in doing some of this. So, for example, Stream TV is one of the events that we launched, and that may never go back to a live event, hence the name, right? So it's kind of, again, learning as we go. But people are getting a lot more comfortable with the use of, and I think that's going to continue. I really do. And I think, frankly, that's going to help push hybrid in the future, because this is what we're all used to, which will extend our reach as well.
Well, I want to thank you. I am not surprised at all that you're having digital growth. In fact, everywhere you've been, you have driven digital growth dramatically. I do want to thank you. John wants to thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, John.